entrepreneurs and technology, high technology. And the idea here really is to have conversations with these experts for them to share their insights of the work that they're doing towards this, towards containing or kind of really fighting this pandemic in terms of where the human race, so to say, can get some reprieve, because like I said, there's a lot of hope. So this is exciting times in the sense that there is a lot of opportunity to innovate. There's a lot of opportunity to be creative, yet at the same time, there is a dark side, which is the suffering and the damage that is being done. So here we are today, and like I said, let me introduce you to my first guest. Hi, Arnab. Arnab has joined us. Arnab from San Diego, is that right? Or
yes, in San Diego, California.
San Diego. Arnab, very quickly, leads the medicinal chemistry team at Caliber, and which is a part of Scripps Research. Is that right, Arnab?
Exactly, yes.
The whole Scripps Research.
Correct,
and,
Scripps Research Institute.
And Scripps, is kind of world-renowned in terms of the scientists at Scripps. They kind of do cutting-edge research and understand and overcome the novel coronavirus. And I guess they're working 24/7, Arnab, as we speak, to share their insights through all the work that you all are doing and feed it to the rest of the world in terms of all of the other research and scientists, industry, what have you, right? You feed
Exactly.
in all that information.
Exactly.
So here we are. We're going to talk more about Arnab's work. And Arnab is obviously leading a team of experts, and they're doing a lot of work to contain this or maybe find a vaccine. So Arnab, there's a lot of hope out there. There's a lot of hope, especially from the medical fraternity and medical industry. We all are hoping, against hope sometimes, something will come up very shortly. So Arnab, I'm going to move over to you. The stage is yours. And before we get there, I think it's important to just state some of the focus that Arnab is going to bring. Arnab's going to talk about, all the collection of known drugs and repurposing them. I think that's going to be core part of your presentation. And I know, Arnab, you have a presentation. So as you present, we will get into a conversation as well. And many out there are eager to understand from you what is the cause and what can they expect and what are some possibilities for an early reprieve from the crisis, which is COVID-19. Yes, Arnab.
Great, thanks a lot, Deep, and I hope everyone is well who's listening to this, and the best wishes to everyone participating today. I want to thank Deep and the organizers also for giving me the opportunity to tell you about some of our work. At the end of the day, I'm a chemist by training, born in Calcutta, raised in the United States, and really our focus at Scripps Research, and particularly Caliber, has been around being able to bring new medicines for a variety of different diseases. And really the last 4 months, we've been very focused on COVID-19, as the rest of the world has been. We have been here in California limited to working in the lab around COVID-19. We have most recently started our laboratory operations in other disease areas where we have multiple ongoing clinical trials in cancer and infectious disease outside of COVID-19. But we've really focused a lot of our effort on COVID-19. I just want to share a little bit about our work in that space. So if everyone can see my slides, let me bring them up. What I wanted to discuss today was really the main theme of my presentation, and I'm hoping the discussion as we move forward this evening is around how can we accelerate COVID-19 drug discovery with what we call the Reframe Drug Discovery Library. What I mean by that is a collection of small molecule drugs, most of which are drugs that you can take by mouth, that have been developed for every disease throughout the world over the last 100+ years, containing all of those molecules and making those molecules all available for any biologist, any physician, any chemist in the world to screen those drug molecules and find the starting points for using an existing medicine to be used in COVID-19. You may ask why one would want to do that. The main purpose for doing that is we know that many drugs are what we call fit for purpose, meaning they were designed and optimized by chemists like myself, who have been trained in organic chemistry and medicinal chemistry to be able to optimize them for drug candidates. That's one fit for purpose opportunity. The other one, which I think is also extremely powerful, is using existing drugs that are being used in other diseases and make them available and find them as discoveries for a new disease. So you can take the exact medicine and use it again for a new disease, for example, with COVID-19. And as mentioned, we're learning a lot about this virus. We're learning a lot about how to develop drugs, vaccines, diagnostics, right? All of the aspects of being able to monitor, treat, and prevent the illness are ongoing. But we're only a few months into this, and everyone should be, I'm very hopeful that as the scientific community and the global community is working on this problem, there's no one who's unaffected by this infection, that we can bring to bear many of the resources and drugs that we have developed over the last 100 years that can be brought forward for COVID-19. So we've been working on this since the end of January, as I mentioned. We've been working with people. We've built this collection with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, important critical funding that allows us to build this technological resource of 12,000 molecules that can be screened. As I've said, what we've been able to find through our drug screening efforts internally at Scripps, as well as by sharing the drug compound collection with groups all around the world. We have nearly 20 plus groups who've accessed the collection, that we have found very interesting starting points that we are now validating to potentially initiate human trials in the next few months to be able to take approved molecules that have been approved for a different disease and apply them to COVID-19.
Arnab, if I were to just kind of request you to just lean into your microphone, or if you're using earphones, your voice is a little faint.
Okay, sure. I'll try to speak up a little.
Is
that
great.
a little bit better on your end? Okay,
just a notch. That's good. Thanks, Arnab.
We can do that. No problem. Thanks, Steve. So what we've been able to also start thinking about is how can we deal with drug combinations? So how can we take combinations of different drugs that may work in different ways and be able to use those for COVID-19? And I have that mentioned here at the bottom of this slide. So what is Reframe? Reframe is a collection of 12,000 molecules, as I've said. These have all been deemed safe in humans. So it's critical to know that these molecules have been tested in many different environments. As you can see, this is one example of Alonzo in the lab actually making these plates available to people. And because the screening plates are small, each plate there, for example, can hold nearly 400 compounds, is 30 plates like that can fit into a small box, can be essentially sent anywhere in the world to be able to get people to drugs, to fund and find new drug molecules. This is open source, meaning we are using this collection. We provide it for free. We provide the data for free. All we ask in return is that when someone screens this drug collection against an assay of theirs, that they make that immediately available in the public domain so people can have actionable data that has been looked at carefully and can be moved forward for potential treatments. So for this audience, I think it's important to point out that drug discovery takes a long time. And whether or not you're talking about starting points that come from natural products or coming from homeopathic medicines or from drug discovery that's done in the to go from an experimental therapy to something that's available to patients can many times take several years. And we know for many diseases, like the HIV pandemic or HIV epidemic that started in the 1980s, it took several years before there were medicines available for people. And that was even with drug repurposing. As you may know, AZT, which was one of the first drugs used for HIV, was actually a cancer drug that was developed and was tested on HIV when that first virus epidemic first started. So we're now trying to take years of drug development, sometimes decades of drug development, and shrink them into weeks or months with COVID-19. It's very important to understand how challenging that is in terms of being able to do that work that quickly for a small molecule drug. And obviously, as we know, things like vaccines and other things take even longer than that. So when I'm talking about years here, we're talking about maybe even greater amounts of time. So at the end, we're hoping that by drug repurposing, we can come in here at the middle of this funnel where we only have a handful of molecules that we can put into human testing and be able to do that quickly.
So
at the very core of what Reframe is the concept of democratizing drug discovery. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that this drug collection has taken many millions of US dollars to build, nearly 20 million US dollars to build. And the Gates Foundation has been very generous in allowing this resource to be built and to be able to be used by everyone. In fact, if you were to ask, how many of these drugs can you actually purchase and test yourself if you wanted to? In fact, only half of the molecules are in fact available publicly, which means that the other half have to be synthesized one by one to be put into the collection. So the collection is very valuable. The collection, though, is at scale. So we can test against tens of thousands different ideas that investigators around the world may have. And the real power of that is that a small amount of drug, nearly the amount that's in one pill that's taken by a human, can last us for nearly 10,000 different screens. So modern technology allows this pill to be able to essentially provide the starting material to be able to test against tens of thousands of assays, which allows us to democratize the whole process of making these compounds available to everyone. We serve as a hub for COVID-19 drug repurposing with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with the National Institutes of Health here in the United States, and many other groups around the world. We're very proud to build a collaborative network with many different groups, with funders, but also with individual academic labs and nonprofits, and now the pharmaceutical industry as well, as large pharmaceutical companies are also accessing the compound collection, but more importantly, also the biological assays and screening capabilities within Caliber and within Scripps. So again, Caliber serves as a drug discovery engine, and we've now used that engine that we've used in cancer, in HIV, in malaria, in tuberculosis, and we're now applying that same platform to COVID-19. This slide is simply to show that we started this journey at the end of January. We started with the screen with Hong Kong University, who were able to first isolate virus from a patient in Hong Kong who was sick with COVID-19, who had recently traveled to Wuhan. We sent the drug collection in late January, before this became a global epidemic, to be able to screen and find interesting compounds that could be used for development for COVID-19 treatment, but also for prevention of COVID-19 infection in people who are at risk of getting the virus because they're either an essential worker, public health worker, physician, public health, etc. And what I just wanted to highlight in the scientific aspect of it is we're kind of approaching two different aspects of the virus. One is the virus itself, and what does the virus do? What proteins does the virus deal with? Polymerase, as you probably know, is inhibited by this molecule remdesivir, which is approved now in many countries around the treatment of COVID-19 infection. And then also for drugs that may affect the host, meaning how can the human body be treated with a drug that can then overcome the virus? And it's important that we approach this from both aspects of what the virus does to the body, but also how can we use the body to be able to fight off the virus more effectively. We've been taking both of those approaches. All of this information is available in the public domain. In fact, this molecule that's shown right here is actually hit in that screen that I mentioned that we started that process in the end of January of this year in Hong Kong. And you can actually see that not only is all of the drug information available, you can find out where we acquired the compound, what the activity of this compound was. This was a particular COVID-19 assay. And you can also see all of the known drug information. This drug actually went into early clinical trials for liver diseases, and now we have found that it's a useful potential drug for COVID-19 infection. And again, all of this information is on our portal. We call that Reframe DB. And if you can just search on Reframe DB, you'll find this compound. You'll find 12 other thousand compounds like it. and the related data that we have, not just on COVID-19, but as we've screened this compound collection over the last 2.5 years against many other viruses and against many other diseases as well. And it's important to point out that for infectious disease drugs, it is very important that we understand how each molecule works against a variety of different viruses, parasites like malaria, tuberculosis, like bacteria like tuberculosis as well, and understand what the fingerprint of each compound is. How specific is each compound in their ability to deal with any of these pathogens, which we know cause a great deal of human diseases and human suffering. It's important for us to be able to put all of that information together and make that available to the global community. We've done a lot of science on COVID-19 in the last few months at Scripps. We've now developed actually the first high throughput drug screen platform. We've screened tens of thousands of drugs, not only in Reframe, but we actually have access to screen tens of thousands of drugs per week. So now we are screening beyond the Reframe collection to many other people's drug collection. What's very powerful about this is this is all using high content imaging, which essentially is the ability to view inside a cell what the host cell is. So this is the DNA that each human host cell has. And then you can see the virus is this green that can then overtake the virus, the cell itself. And we can use that as a way to image each individual drug on each individual cell or a collection of cells in each well and understand how well does the compound work. This allows us to screen tens of thousands of compounds. And I'll leave it at that. I'd like to have some time for discussion, but simply to mention that just like it's true in frontline workers, it takes a great scientific team, a very courageous team, a very thoughtful team, and a very powerful team to put this all together. And I'm very, very proud to be working, as Deep mentioned, with a variety of very wonderful scientists and wonderful advisors at the Gates Foundation who've been critical in enabling this work. Thanks.
Thanks, Arnab, for that presentation. And yes, there is a lot of data. There's a lot of information out there. And I guess thanks to technology, Arnab, that we are able to analyze so fast now and all the analytics that goes behind it. So my question here would be, for the audience now, while, there is a lot of information floating out there, you touched upon remdesivir, and then there is many other theories in terms of what is happening in various countries, how some people are just not affected, and some, notwithstanding how old they are recovering really fast. Some are not. So there is so much out there, and there is a lot of confusion which is creating chaos in the minds of normal human beings who may not be scientists.
Sure.
And who may not understand the nitty-gritty and how really molecules work, how compounds work, and the role of our DNA. Right, that plays a role as well, your whole composite. Now, with all of this, I think what the people would want to hear today is, what's the hope? So can you talk of,
Sure.
while you worked a lot for the past 2 months, Arnab, do you see some signs? Can you give an example of a breakthrough that you believe is now going to lead to something larger, and there is something on the way around the corner? Yeah.
Right. So how do you look past the noise and try to understand what might be a way that scientists are evolving their thinking around this virus? So let me say that as we saw in the very early days of this, we saw and are seeing a lot of clinical trials that are being done around the world around the concept of drug repurposing. Okay. And the early days of that work, really from the work that started on COVID-19 initially in China, but then also in this work that I mentioned that we were involved in Hong Kong, is this idea of, can we take drugs that we already know work against hepatitis C, HIV, and apply them to COVID-19? Quinine-based antimalarials as an example as well. All of these have been done with the intention of, we expect them to work, so we should try them, right? And I think that's an important first step. As I mentioned, the reason why I brought the AZT analogy is because I think it's important to know that in the early days of that epidemic, we also looked into virus-related molecules that could have been useful. And those were some of the first drugs that were tested. But the next phase, the next stage, as you learn about the virus, is when you start thinking about, well, what drugs do we expect will work, using more scientific rigor in saying we have many compounds. And for example, in the screens that I mentioned here, we not only have 1 or 2 drugs, we have nearly 40 drugs. And how do you take those 40 drugs and run them through a lot more tests to know what is the best example, what is the best possibility for us to be able to see an effect in humans as we are seeing many more things about this virus. Understanding that has been what I think the scientific community has done an amazing job of in the last few months. And I think that will allow us to be able to use drugs with much stronger evidence that we expect these compounds to be active, not only based on their activity on cells, like I showed the picture of the cells, but also what do we know about the drug and its ability? How much of the drug can be given to someone? Can one expect that given the amount of drug you would give someone, that that would be strong enough, there would be enough drug present in the body at a safe level to actually do something based on that in vitro data? Those are the relationships we've built in the last few months, which I think really allow another level of scientific rigor into which drugs could be potentially used in humans. And I think that will be very important because that will make it very clear what things we expect to work and which things we have much greater probability of working. And as science always happens, it's important for us to be able to figure out what has the highest, medium, and lowest probability, because then the data we get from that information will allow us to further refine the drug candidates. I think that's where I see a lot of progress in the last 2 months, which I think did not exist when we were talking in the early days of this crisis in January and February of this year.
So what does that progress then mean in terms of, would it reflect on some sort of more potent medication? Like, okay,
exactly. I think it's going to lead to molecules. That's going to lead to molecules that are more potent. It's going to lead to molecules that can be combined with drugs that already are starting to show some promise in humans, for example, like remdesivir, and be able to thoughtfully put together more than one drug. As we now know for HIV, right, as an example, one drug is not enough. You need sometimes 2, 3, sometimes even up to 4 drugs to combine. What drugs do you use? And while HIV and COVID-19 are different infections, the general principles of drug resistance and the general principle of drug combinations being more effective in beating the virus is something that we can learn from. It's the lesson that we've learned through the history of viruses and how we can potentially treat them. The goal is really to be able to go in, like I said, in the next month to 2 months with some of these new drug candidates with a stronger data set behind their potential utility and begin those trials. I think those will be the critical aspects of success for the sort of work that I just described today.
In fact, I'll give you an example here in India, and you know India, in Rajasthan, Jaipur, in early days when this had just, the first cases started surfacing in India, there was this couple from another country. They were tested positive, and they were, of course, quarantined and all of that, regular process. And they were, of course, some of the first cases. They were amongst the first cases that surfaced. They were administered an HIV drug for HIV, and they came out of it. It was a couple from, from the West, and they came out of it. And those are the first instances of, so that gave people some hope. But, the question, Arnab, is how consistent are these reports?
Right.
While there is experimentation, can we safely say, okay, you know what, this works?
Yeah.
When
right.
will that happen? So
yeah.
when are
So
we getting there?
yeah. So I think with remdesivir, you're already seeing that, right? So I think the data in those trials clearly indicate that while we can do better, and I think everyone can say we can do better, right? We can treat with an oral drug, so something that someone can take at home. Someone who is mildly symptomatic, someone who wants to protect not only stop themselves from getting advanced disease, but protecting their family members by reducing the amount of virus that they're shedding is critical. So being able to come up with oral treatments is important. Coming up with medicines that we know work in as many different types of patients is also important. So those sort of trials with drugs is going to be essential, okay? Those are the next pieces that we need to put together. And I think being able to come up with those solutions that can be applied all over the world in all different situations, in as many different types of patients, not just critically ill, but also in mild patients that may be doing a good job of their own body dealing with the virus, but to reduce their probability of going into the hospital and to have a critical situation, and to protect their community and most importantly, their immediate family. members who are
Yeah.
seeing this virus every day that they're shedding is going to be important. And those are the sort of types of medicines that we're focused on at Scripps and at Caliber, and certainly working with the Gates Foundation. That's one thing that we are critically focused on, is being able to apply those sort of drugs in a real clinical trial where evidence shows that it not just works in a handful of people, but works in a majority of people, that allows us to be able to get them registered.
Oh, so that looks promising. So we can very safely say that the future is promising in terms of at least containing the COVID.
The amount that we know about this virus, and the amount that we know about what I call the pharmacology of the virus, meaning if you were to take a condition and treat it with many different drugs, you are going to learn more and more each time you test the drug. You're going to learn more and more each time you test the virus in a different world. So I showed you one world with the colored pictures, but the virus can live in lung cells. The virus can live in all different types of environments. What are the constellation of all the other things that are going on around the virus that affect how the virus works? Those are all the assays that didn't exist in January when we started our journey, but are now available now that we're in May of 2020.
So with all this and all the data, and some of the data very kind of validated as well, and you have already run some trials, and I understand you're going to run more human trials very soon of some of the drugs that you're experimenting with and the compounds. Now, the question is that is this the time, i.e. to safely say as well that there won't be any more surprises, or this virus could still spring some surprises, because it did. You know, as it progressed, it sprung a lot of surprises.
Of course, and it will, I think one thing that people have to, be very appreciative of is the fact that the virus will change, and we now know from dealing with virus diseases that are chronic viruses, but also viruses that come and go. Okay, so we've learned a lot over the history of poliovirus and HIV and other viruses that are chronic viruses, but also these kinds of sporadic viruses, right? And we know about that from coronaviruses, from SARS-1, as well as from MERS, for example. That these things do change, and the environment where they're most effective to do their work also will change. But the science will allow us to be able to keep up with this, and the ability to take medicines and apply them in the right parts of the world is one of the reasons why it's critical that we have a global community that's looking at this. And I think this concept of being able to share resources, share technologies, and use this sort of platform to be able to enable the whole world in doing drug discovery, I think is a critical aspect of being able to measure success, to be able to outsmart the virus as it's trying to outsmart us.
Yeah, so, and because you're in the ecosystem, Arnav, you're very close into this whole ecosystem of research and the science behind it and all the discoveries. Now, we do read in the media that there's a lot of collaboration happening between scientists within countries, across boundaries. So is that true? Is this information really flowing, or are there barriers?
There are always barriers. And the barriers often come down to, being able to share the right technologies, right? So for example, in that screen that I mentioned we did in Hong Kong University, we actually ended up, through a collaborator, sending equipment to the lab in Hong Kong that could actually be used to be able to screen the 12,000 compound drug library. So, and in the past too, I'd also mentioned, for example, we did a drug screen in malaria in Thailand, where we not only sent the compounds, so we sent those little plates, 12,000 compounds in 30 plates, but we also sent some equipment, which took a large box. And then we also sent a person for 3 months to go into that lab and actually run the drug screen themselves. In fact, that person, Melina Bukowski, is actually one of the main people who's actually doing our COVID-19 work. So what do we learn from that? Well, we learned that many times, even with the best of intentions, all of the tools to be able to do drug discovery may not exist in the place where you need to immediately run a screen, test drugs, and help find something that can be used in patients as quickly as possible. So providing those resources in places where those resources are limited or non-existent is critical. That's the physical part of it. The data in the sharing and the collaborative nature, I have seen nothing in my career in almost 25 years of doing chemistry and drug discovery have I seen as much collaboration as I have in the last 4 months around COVID-19. And I mentioned our work at the end of January, but we should all be very clear. At the end of January, the world was not thinking that we would be where we are now in 4 months. I don't think and I think, it's important to know how much the world has changed in that period of time. But having a tool that can be applied to many different diseases in parallel, 10,000 different times, as I mentioned, allowed us to be able to be involved in COVID-19 drug discovery early. Now, what does that mean for the future? What it means for the future is that framework of sharing drugs, sharing information, sharing know-how, sharing knowledge, sharing equipment, sharing people, all of those can be brought to bear against many more diseases other than COVID-19. And I think this shows how critical it is for future sort of situations and present situations that require that sort of collaborative framework. I think that is probably the best part of the human legacy that I think can come out of SARS-CoV-2.
I think we all are sure of that. And you're so right, because the amount of learning that has happened is huge. Like you said, the gap in understanding has really narrowed from what is in January and now, and things are only getting, the minds are expanding. If you look at science continues to expand in that sense. So I think we are all, like I said, people are being impacted differently depending on their country, their geography, what have you. But Arnab, this has been really insightful. I'm very sure people tuning in and listening into your conversation are going back with optimism. If nothing else, they're going back with some kind of, if not relief, then more insight, more knowledge, which perhaps informs their thinking then. It informs their action, because like I said, there's so much information now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the validity of all of that is what is being questioned, because every other day there is another piece of information. It's
right.
like, one bombshell after another.
Right.
So this gives a very good insight. The way you kind of, presented it, it seems like all these scientists and researchers, there's some sort of a symphony happening. It seems like that. They're working in collaboration, sharing information, and very positive about the near future. There is going to be a breakthrough, and we know that's coming, right? So with that, Arnab, I'd like to take leave, and I'm absolutely, again, very thankful, and it was our pleasure to have you. And I think we do have Michael. So Michael, a quick hello. That's Arnab. So Arnab, happy for you to kind of listen in and, just kind of, if you want to tune out to your video.
Yes.
And we'll be in touch. There may be many inquiries we'll get, Arnab. And, this is also for the audience, people listening in, people tuning in from all over the world. Please feel free to write in. We will be sharing our coordinates. You could write in. We could pass on your information to Arnab. And, Arnab, is it all right to, kind of pass that information?
Of course.
People are
I want to be able to, right. I think it's critical that
might want to connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So thank you very much again, Arnab.
Thanks a lot.
Segue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi. So with us, we segueing into something very different from what we were talking about. Yet we have with us one of leading entrepreneurs in the smart cities space, if you like, Michael. And you've done a lot of work around innovative technology breakthroughs. You've been on this journey of smart cities and improving cities with technology. So before we get there, Michael, I'm going to introduce you to the audience. Michael is an impassioned architect, as he would want to be called, an urbanist and an entrepreneur. Michael has founded and led high growth companies in the US and Asia for more than 2 decades. Now, he studied architecture at Yale and Cambridge, earned a Fulbright scholarship, and he's done many things, actually, besides all of this. He's also earned and got awarded in the construction of 40 under 40, and in 2014 was also honored by World City Summit as a young leader in Singapore for his long contribution to improving sustainability and quality of life in cities. I go back a few years with Michael. We continue to exchange notes, And Michael is very passionate. He's a very passionate entrepreneur. He is kind of a leader in what he is attempting to do here. And Michael will, talk more about his organization, which is City Zenith, and of course, Smart World Pro, which is the digital twin technology. And recently, Michael also, did a white paper in collaboration with many other experts. And Michael will, of course, talk more about that as well. So Michael, without further ado, the stage is yours. And yes.
Well, thank you very much, Deep. It's a pleasure to be here and presenting in this unusual and extraordinary forum alongside some really phenomenal people. And it was wonderful to listen to Arnab talk about the vaccine industry's response, obviously, so critically to the COVID crisis. And I'm going to talk about what the building industry has to do in responding to COVID. And we, as Deep mentioned, produced a white paper recently, the title of which was called How Digital Twins, which is a new technology that I will talk about today, can help mitigate the impact of COVID, specifically in the use of buildings and infrastructure worldwide, which we all live, work, and play in every day so critically. So this image in the middle of the screen was part of that white paper that we created. It's kind of an iconic graphic that shows a lot of information attached to a 3D digital model. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is how we can take all this information that's being generated by multiple sources about the virus itself, about things like stockpiles that are of equipment that are essential to addressing the virus, how all these data points come together and can be uniquely analyzed and optimized in this type of technology environment we call digital twinning. So I have a couple of things I'm going to share just slide-wise, and then I'm going to get into a description, I think, of the technology itself and show you a bit more about what exactly a digital twin looks like, and then get into how this really is applied in the case of COVID. Now, I want to say first and foremost that this is a thesis, that we have not yet developed this quote-unquote digital twin use case. So what I did was I went to other digital twin experts from around the world, from Singapore, where they have a digital twin of the entire city, to the UK, where they have a national digital twin program, et cetera, and took the viewpoints of different experts, even the World Economic Forum, in this particular thesis, and the conclusions were really, really interesting. So a little bit about us itself. City Zenith has been around for about 10 years. We are a digital twin solution provider. Digital twins I'll get to in a second. We've been called everything from SimCity for real cities, to Google Earth on steroids, to my favorite was Minecraft for architects. These are all descriptions of City Zenith's core Smart World Pro platform, which you see on the monitor there. Essentially, we'll get into what it really is, but digital twins themselves aggregate massive amounts of information into a single information model, and those are used to optimize all kinds of outcomes. This market is growing massively. It was, I think, touched $3.8 billion in 2019, and it's growing at something like 45% a year, which is incredible as a technology trend, just to give you a sense of how popular digital twins are actually becoming. And the word's getting out there these days. This is all things that have been, from the BBC to the Financial Times to TechCrunch, writing about us and our digital twin projects all over the world. This is all new, unless I would say a year or so. Deep did give me an introduction. I just want to mention that I'm an architect by training, and that's very fundamental to what we do. I started the first several years of my career on a traditional path to be an architect, working for major US practices and ultimately opening those up in Asia. And I then shifted to the technology side of the spectrum in 2004 when I grew a company called Satelier that was invested by Sequoia Capital, the same folks who invested in companies like Oracle and Yahoo and Cisco, et cetera, to develop a BIM services company, a 3D information modeling company. And that became really a transformational experience that led to where we are today. And this trend, I think, is going to continue. They say by 2025, this will be something like a $35 billion global market, which is astounding in terms of access. And potentially, almost every major commercial building will have a digital twin within the same time frame. So digital twins themselves, by definition, are virtual replicas of physical buildings and assets connected to the data in and around them. That's what they are. And they deliver unique value at different phases along the entire life cycle, from design and planning, when architects will use digital twins, to construction, when contractors will use them, onto the operational process, when building owners, property managers, asset managers will also use them. This is all in the context of the building space. So what I wanted to do, yes,
Michael,
please.
I have a question here, just for the layman and just for people to understand. Now, is digital twin in itself a what we would call an exponential technology, or is it founded on some technology?
It's a description. It's a description. Digital twin technology, and I'll describe this in the 2 slides later, kind of comes in a category that is related to 3 other technologies. And there are BIM, GIS, and gaming. I'll describe that in a second. What I thought I would do is take you through just a quick look at what the product looks like in action. And this recent project that we've done in the United Kingdom, but it gives an example of how digital twins are being used to aggregate massive amounts of uncoordinated, disconnected data inside a single smart building. And this will give you the type of, or a kind of perspective into how granular this type of technology can be when aggregating data. The entire model is actually a live data object model. Those objects are connected to databases either from the city or paid services, or in this case, we directly imported 3D models from the architect and converted those into asset models. And then we attach all these information to those models from different systems, control systems, facility systems. We can track the movement throughout the building of people, of objects, of goods, etc. Then we visualize that information, whether those are IoT sensors or humidity, temperatures readings, control points, etc. All this then gets located where it belongs and modeled like this, and then correlated to find deficiencies. So that we'll have, for example, an alert from a control system that will then send immediate notification to a vendor management system, informing the engineer to come and address the problem. So these digital twins are about taking disconnected data and finding these amazing data correlations and efficiencies to create a whole new world of doing things. And we've been seeing this technology deployed in the manufacturing sector. Here you see the integration of even sales tools like these are called Matterport models or live 3D JPEG models, lease information coming from leasing systems. And you can look forward and backwards in time and look at data. What is the status of leases going to be 3 years from now? And then again, refer back to a dashboard. So we looked at all this type of, this massive ability to aggregate and visualize and analyze information. And in the building world, we use this in factories. We see this on construction sites. Digital twins are being used for a whole bunch of things, even security purposes, aggregating things like security feeds from different points inside or outside a building, both public and private feeds into the same model to create a more secure environment. So when you see all these things, you kind of get a sense of the possible. You really can in 2020 aggregate almost any kind of information and analyze that data. And in the building world, this is wildly revolutionary because for all these years, that type of technology has really been in the domain of multiple tools. And so having them as one tool is finally suddenly possible in the realm of digital twinning. Deep, you were talking about other kinds of tools in this space, not to bore the people on the who are listening in, but there are things called building information or 3D modeling tools that the building industry uses, GIS tools, which are basically 2D maps. These are all related tools, but not the same as a true digital twin type of platform. And we began thinking through, the power of this technology. And at a board meeting, it was one of our directors approached me and he said, we really should be thinking about, how we can better address, use our technology to help address the situation today. And later on that evening, I was listening to New York Governor Cuomo, who impressed me a lot during the this crisis. And I continued to watch him for several days after that as he kind of led his state through the crisis. And they are, as everyone knows, the worst affected state, in many ways the worst affected part of the world. So it occurred to me that he was using slides at the end, to present information, that he had 20 different data points from different places, locations of hospitals, logistics information from vehicles moving things. He didn't know where people were. He knew where hospital beds were. He couldn't. There were all these different data points, and we thought, well, there really should be a kind of digital twin solution to all of this. If they had a digital twin for the city of New York that was granular enough, we could actually aggregate all those data points, run analytics, and actually be able to more successfully address the problem. Knowing where it is, being able to contain it in a 3D environment in advance by being able to study and analyze its progress using tools is a way to contain the spread of a virus without having to shut down an entire economy, for example. Because one of the things that economies are struggling with right now is that we don't know exactly where it is or what to do about it, so we shut everything down and throw a big net around everything. And you can see what the economic impact of that is and has been. So we believe that people are never going to use buildings the same way again. We're just not. Get used to things like contactless entry, temperature checks on the way into major buildings, et cetera, sensors that are tracking your movement, logs that will log your personal body temperature every time you go into and out of a building. Get used to all of that. In South Korea, China, and Singapore. Go ahead, Dee,
Michael,
please.
have you been flooded with inquiries? And because what you're sharing seems to be kind of a breakthrough in one sense, because I of course, and we've been generally getting a lot of information. We see a lot of technology, what's going on. You're right, safe buildings, smart campuses. But for you to link this up to containing the pandemic using this whole technology that you have. So,
right.
So what does it look like for you going forward in terms of leveraging this? And that's what I meant by inquiries.
Well, I think the white paper was published 3 weeks ago. It's been picked up in 29 major media outlets around the world, from Reuters to Asia One to you name it, across Australia. And so there has been a tremendous amount of discussion around this as a subject. The incoming from various parties, from cities who are interested in the solution, to national governments, to building owners asking for more information. It's very widely. When you see who the contributors are in the article, it will make more sense. But yes, I think there's broad interest in figuring out how this can be used.
Sure, yeah. So go on.
So, going on to what we saw happening in Asia to some extent, that I think really impressed me, and I think, to some extent, full disclosure, I am an American. I lived in Asia for 24 years, 4 years in China, 20 years in India, and so roughly half my life between the West and the East. So my perspective is different. I raised my family in Asia. I grew up. I've taken classes in Chinese for 3 years. I've done, and I've visited almost every Indian state in my journeys looking at architecture. My perspective is a bit different. And I have been a believer in Asia's rise since, I could say, roughly the early 90s when I lived in China, and was watching any part of the world grow in the way that it has and mature, and then in many ways now leapfrog. Has been fascinating. So this was an example for me of many Asian cities adopting smart city technologies faster than Western and other cities. They were able to deploy those and use some of them, but then repurpose them to hack them into a kind of makeshift digital twin. Not a true, like we call it, digital twin, but mobile apps that did this, a 2D map that did that, showed the location of stockpiles, etc. That it's been part of also watching that response and seeing how effective South Korea and Singapore, where we also work, in China, were in responding to this, made us think that information is absolutely key. So we concluded that there are really 3 reasons why 3D digital twins specifically are uniquely helpful in a situation like this. One of them certainly is having a real-time interoperable environment that can aggregate massive amounts of data and can be shareable. A lot of the problems we saw in the hacked response was a lack of shareability between tools and the ability to collaborate data between those tools, which if they could have done, would, I think, enable an even more robust and sweeping response. Secondly, if you really look at the wisdom of experience in all of this, digital twins are used to tracking the movement of a package from a factory point to via a carrier to the endpoint. They are used to tracking massive amounts of sophisticated moving data from multiple systems, making them the perfect platform to track a virus. Digital twins 3D ones track spatial data, and this virus very much is a spatial problem. So knowing where this problem is moving, being able to know that somebody's on the 30th floor who's infected, or somebody is, the spatial analysis becomes essentially critical. And that leads to point 3. These types of open 3D digital twins like we support provide limitless data correlation and simulation capabilities. Where is it going next? Will I have enough supplies? Will the logistics be calculated in such a way that we're going to be able to reach our goals? Can we look forward 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? How many different data points can be combined? So we published this white paper, and a wonderful magazine out of New York called Office Insight that writes a lot of heady pieces about design picked it up and wrote a wonderful piece, comparing our work with this thesis to the work of Dr. John Snow, who was a 19th century epidemiologist in the UK, famous for deploying groundbreaking statistical graphing methods to predict and actually find out exactly what the location of the original cholera outbreak was, like a water pump somewhere in London. It's amazing work that he did. Now, we don't want to be compared to the work of somebody who did something amazing. We have created a thesis, but what the article did note was that our thesis, 166 years, hasn't changed much. It is just the technology that's changed. It's still about finding out where things are, tracking their movement, isolating them, and then making decisions. What's changed is the technologies that we have around us to make that possible, and hence that's kind of where we are. We had invited a number of folks, as I mentioned, to give perspective because we have our own, but I thought it would be interesting to gather perspectives from different people. Deep, did you want to comment on this?
No, I was just, I had a question, but you go and.
Absolutely, we're doing well on time, so go ahead.
No worries. So, you've talked about digital twins, and that was key for people to understand that this is a term which is being used and thrown up out there. People are beginning to use this term digital twins. Even in the automobile industry, people talk about it for various reasons. They understand it, right? Now, the point is, you also talked about, and I like the connect you made, and which is very valid, how when you're tracking something from get-go to every point, and even people in buildings on floors, and then how you track this virus, and we don't need to then react or shut down, and we kind of take a very informed decision in that sense, well informed, right. and the action would be very different, of course, right? Not so radical, maybe. Right. So while radical collaborations are good, but I'm not sure if radical solutions are always good, but that's another topic, right? Now, the point here is, the question was, what will a future now, of connected digital communities, cities, countries, and the world really mean for people, Michael?
Steve, you're always ahead of me. That's 3 slides away.
So I'm an R1 actually, and I've not done your whole brain profiling, but it seems like you're an R1 because I know you from the past, and you're a very Imagineer, strategist kind of person. That's an R1, a very right-brained.
I'm about to plow into exactly what I think where we're headed with all of this. And
okay, so I wasn't privy to your slides, so it was I don't know.
That was very intuitive. That's exactly where we're headed. And we are headed towards a world of network digital twins. I'll explain that in a second.
Sure.
The individuals that we invited here included Neil Thompson from the UK's Digital Twin Working Group. As I mentioned, the UK has a national program, and he's he likes to break things down and said really it's all about getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And really, actually, that's true, absolutely true. And Terence Tan himself was, if those of you are familiar, Singapore has a very widely publicized 3D digital twin project called Virtual Singapore. He was one of the lead people on that. And one of the key points that that Terence made is that digital twins actually allow now for people information to be incorporated into the building information, so you can really analyze now the impact of one on the other. And COVID was kind of the impetus to kind of push those two things together, because prior to that, digital twins were more about assets. And so very interesting comments you made. Tom Shercliffe is one of the world's leading smart building experts. He was the one who really walked me through in the article and said, here are all the actual on the ground changes to buildings, contactless entry, he gave us a whole bunch of different things to expect down the, what we call prop tech pipeline, that will change the way in which buildings are used. And Peter Ciala, he was is the CEO of a company called Delos, and they basically sponsor the the wellness building standard in the world. And his valid contribution was that health data over the last few years has become more important than ever to the concerns of building owners and their priorities, and now it's even going to be more. As tenants will want to say, I'm not going to move into your space until I know that it's COVID safe. How do you guarantee me that? And that's where digital twins again will come into helping to kind of solve that issue. I'll kind of quickly wrap up with these couple of folks. Greg from the World Economic Forum really saw this kind of digital twins as connecting all of the civic data. That what's been missing is that they've all been very property based, but now you can kind of pull all the data together to really provide a single platform to the entire populace, as it were. And Jagan Shah, one of my dear friends, was a former director in Delhi of the National Institute of Urban Affairs, believes that especially large countries like India need a platform where they can track all of this, and it becomes more and more, I think.
Yeah, I was going to get there. I was. Yeah,
so,
what's really happening, and Amravati, I think you spoke about.
Exactly. In fact, when we won the Amravati digital twin contract in South India for that new capital city, one of their key concerns was being able to provide information uniformly at scale to any citizen who wanted it. I mean, this is pre-COVID, mind you. So again, I'll end with this and then take questions perhaps. I think, Deep, as you very astutely predicted, the world is moving towards a brave new future of networked digital twins, in my view. We went from making all of our drawings in 2D on paper to making them in CAD, which was the first attempt at computer-aided design, to now everything is mandated in 3D. Digital twins will just help make that happen at scale. Crises like these, like the coronavirus, will accelerate the adoption of these types of technologies as the world moves from where we are today towards digitalization and virtualization generally. Digital twins will pave that path for the movement towards virtualization in the building industry, there's no doubt. I think we predict that the big users are going to be, of course, owners, tenants, shareholders, insurers, facilities users, energy companies, majorly, et cetera, et cetera. So I conclude with the following, and the take-home thesis, if you will, that if this is the emergency that forces the world to adopt some type of shared data platform at scale, it will also be the same platform that later on will help the world deal with climate change. Climate change is also fundamentally really an engineering problem and a data problem. As it later on becomes a policy problem and other things. The lack of a shared common platform, common standards in addressing those types of issues are every bit as severe as they are in sharing medical information and building information. So, the hope is that in, of course, the big blue bright ocean world, that this type of technology would be deployed, would be used for this purpose, and then repurposed for even greater mass collaboration efforts like addressing climate change. I'll pause there. That's my 25 minutes, Steve.
Yeah, so, just a few things that, surfaced in my mind and a few questions here. Now, the point is, you touched upon a point that basically it's going to be technology. It's a technology issue. You said climate change. And I kind of agree. I was of a different school of thought some years ago that, basically it's a human issue. Humans need to change their mindsets, lifestyle. And especially after COVID, many people, there's a lot of noise out there about how humans have cut their own throat in one sense. It's because of their lifestyles, their value systems, and all that they do, their actions, which lead to such pandemics. While there could be half truth in that or full truth in that, we still don't know. But the point is, Michael, how do you stop humans from being humans? That's my point. How do you stop? Because there's you, the 6-7 billion people. You don't expect them to lead a certain type of lifestyle which will really affect the climate in a positive way, or they will continue to do what they want to do, whether they want to litter, whether they want to be more of a consumers, own more cars, run more cars. Finally, it does come to technology. How do humans stretch themselves to safeguard and neutralize all the wrong also that humans do? So it's kind of a dichotomy. In one sense.
It is. You hope that issues like COVID right now, you read a lot.
So you want to stop sharing the slides, so
yes.
It could be more kind of visible to the audience. Yeah, there you go.
You hope situations like COVID can help things change. You hope that it can bring about fundamental change. I think that's quite possible. When you kind of reevaluate, cities right now are saying we don't want to reopen the same way. We want more pedestrian space. We want more of this. We want more of that. That's not reopened the same way now that we have an opportunity to change. I think that's these types of situations create those moments for great transformation too, right? And ultimately, as you mentioned, I agree. Yes, climate change is an engineering problem. It's also an economic model problem. At some point, the world needs to develop an economic model that rewards conservation rather than consumption. And until that happens, we're going to continue to consume, and we're going to continue to compete to consume. When we start competing to conserve, things will change. And we need forward-thinking charter countries, charter cities, charter districts to start leading with those models to show us all how to do it. We're not on the right path with that right now. So.
Or Michael, maybe a longer run of a pandemic like this, where things don't come back to normal very fast, where people have stopped buying cars for almost 3-4 months.
Or flying planes.
They're flying, but there's no automobile sales happening. Retailers, they are really like, people are not buying clothes, they're just buying grocery. They're stacking grocery, not clothes. They're not going buying shoes. So that could be that, if this were to happen for a longer term, people kind of get accustomed to not. Asha, stay on, don't move away. We're just wrapping up with Michael. Michael, thank you very much indeed for taking and making this time. It's been very informative, not just for me. I've been hanging around with you. We talk often now and then. So I pretty much know, as a lot of your world. Yet for the viewers and the audience, Michael, this was almost an eye-opener, because for anyone to kind of think, okay, how does this really kind of contain, or, how does this address the problem out there, the crisis? And you explained it really well. You connected the dots. And we talked about the future. And thanks a lot, very informative. So Michael, we may have inquiries because we always open it up, and we invite inquiries, if people want to get in touch. Because they could be entrepreneurs out there who are watching our shows. They are, academicians watching this show. They're watching you all online. So we will keep in touch. We will, if something comes our way, we are going to, shoot it off to you. And anything else, Michael, that you want to share? Okay, Michael's gone off.
I'm back. Yeah, no, I'm great. Thank you for this opportunity. It was wonderful to share this work and to listen to the wonderful work that Arnab is doing. And I look forward to hearing about Asha's work. So thanks, everyone.
Sure.
Thanks.
Hey, Arnab is right there too. So wow, we have a quorum and that's really cool. So Asha, without further ado, let me quickly turn over to Asha. Welcome, Asha, firstly, and again, taking time out. I know it's early in the morning for you, and I'm not sure if you're a morning person. but we are all set now to go. So a very quick introduction to Asha. Asha Jadeja is an Indian-born entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist, based in Palo Alto, California. In her long career as a venture capitalist, Asha has invested in over 100 startups, some of which have gone on to become public companies. Congratulations, Asha. That's tremendous work. Asha also initiated the spread of the maker movement and the maker hubs. Are we going to talk about all that as well, Asha? I don't know, but it's good for me to kind of at least highlight this.
How much time are we going to speak?
So Asha, we have about half an hour with us. I mean, we could go over, but let's see how our conversations go, because there are people out there, they are eager to listen to some of your thoughts. And I love the topic, untethering the rocket ship India. Okay, we'll get to that. So Asha, later, I think, and later to India, Pakistan, and Brazil, there was a Maker Fest, and which is a 3-day event that we were talking about, brings local makers, educators, and civil society together for a week of collaboration and co-inventing. Asha also has initiated a network of fab labs around the world to help spark off distributed manufacturing using just-in-time creation, tinkering, and deliveries. I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that. I think the last piece I want to mention is the Rajiv Circle Fellowship. She's developing a dynamic corridor of entrepreneurship, collaboration, and community between the Silicon Valley and South Asia. And I think that's one of the focus areas, Asha, that you're going to bring today. It's that bridging that whole piece between India as well, startups, and the Silicon Valley. But Asha, before we go there, over to you. The stage is yours. I think we might want to start with, I were to trigger a conversation, it would be, you're an advocate of, for lack of better words, of Indian companies to address global markets, and from the get-go, which means, really selling in the global market. So Asha, tell us, I've been working a lot with high-tech companies. I work with CEO founders. I coach them. Michael and I also go back. That's the kind of relationship we had in terms of the coaching journey, and there are many others. Now, I do see you have a point, because many of the startup CEOs and founders in India, of course, they are either supporting product companies in the US to kind of stand up their products, which is more service. But when we talk of products, so what are the opportunities then, Asha, that exist, which you want to highlight for Indian entrepreneurs?
Sense of India right now, as I dabble in investing in Indian startups, I have about 20 of them by now, is that there is a lot of, I think there's a lot of, India is a very wealthy country, and there is a lot of taxpayer money that goes into governance of India. My own concern is that the distribution of Indian taxpayer money is not going into channels where it should be going. So I feel that a lot of taxpayer money just gets distributed into running a very inefficient government, and a very inefficient, huge bureaucracy. I mean, at every level, from panchayat level to the state level to the center, huge bureaucratic infrastructure, which is getting in the way of progress. So for me, my own dream right now, just let me back up a little bit about my own bread and butter. I've been a venture capitalist for, 25 years now, and that's my bread and butter. But on the side now, what we have over the last, 8 or 10 years is a family foundation that donates roughly $1 to $2 million to various things in India. And a lot of these are non-profits, these are NGOs, these are, again, it's maker events, my own maker events. My Fab Labs cost me roughly $150,000. So when we donate it to an Indian university, there's a capital cost to that, which is great. Which is, it's a rewarding contribution for us. What it does is, of course, it enables a whole bunch of different distributed just-in-time manufacturing and so on. But in the process, what this has allowed me to do is open lift the hood, so to speak, open the lid on India and see what's going on. And I am absolutely certain that those of us who are trying to make an impact in India is, we are a drop in the ocean. The real money is sitting with the government, and that's with the taxpayer money, and a lot of that is misdirected into things which are not growth oriented. So, if these funds, and we're talking billions,
As an example, as an example, I understand, I quite resonate with you.
yes.
Correct.
So as an example, I'll give you an example of, so for example, money that is Indian taxpayer money that is dedicated towards, sponsoring entrepreneurship, towards enabling India. A lot of that, it goes to the central government, then it goes into things like, central government schemes for enabling entrepreneurship. And when you look into it, really what it does is it ends up going into buildings. Now this is a huge problem, because we have known for years now that a real startup does not come out of an incubator building. Real startups come out by, enabled by real entrepreneurs who typically are free people. They love their freedom. They want to be in their own garage. They want to be in their own grandma's garage, or in their dorm, their own bedroom. They normally don't sit in a government incubator. So that's an example of something which I feel is, is a waste of money. And I've brought this up to multiple, IT secretaries and things like that in India.
What has been the response?
And an example of is a wonderful lady, actually, wonderful IAS lady called Aruna Sundararajan. I met her here in Palo Alto, and she was an IT secretary at that time. I think now she's in telecom. But she came to visit our Rajiv Circle Fellowship in the Bay Area. And I mentioned to her that we must, that not a single, successful company has ever come out of an incubator, ever, in any part of the world. There is just nothing there. So building incubators is a colossal waste of money. And that's just an example. So we can all, those of us who are trying to make an impact in India can bring in some, some funds and some expertise, but the real, the value that needs to be unleashed in India is the government funding that needs to go into the right channels. And I have a plan for that, and we have been, sharing that with the government. Hopefully it will happen, because what we have is, for the first time, we have a prime minister who absolutely loves the idea of startups. For some reason, he has been convinced, actually, he has felt, every time I see him talking, at least to media, is that we have a prime minister who feels that startups and successful tech companies are the way forward for India. And we have now, thankfully, we have examples, great examples in people like Oyo, Ritesh Agarwal of Oyo Rooms and things like this. So there's a lot of good examples coming out of India now, but it could be multiplied and scaled, hundreds of times over. So that's what we are towards, and that's what I mean by unleashing and untethering a rocket ship. India is a rocket ship of brilliant people, incredible tech talent, and an ability to speak English, to be able to we have our engineers speak excellent English. Actually, it's, this is a big advantage over something like China. And we have a global workforce which can integrate globally very fast also. And this is why I was mentioning to you, Deep, that it's important that we all work towards, sort of enabling those strategic interventions that can unleash, some of this tech talent.
Yeah. So the next part then is, when you say that, yes, you are in talks with some of the government officials, policymakers, there's something that's happening. Asha, like I just shared, I work very closely with founder CEOs only to pivot as their coach and all of that. And that's what I practice. Ourselves, we are a startup, and we are coming up with a product which you've not announced. It's leading edge, very on the fly. I shared it with Lara the other day, very leading edge, one of its kind. Now, my point here is, so then tell us, what are the barriers? You're right, when you talk of selling in the global market and having a more globally oriented, even in terms of quality. Let's talk of quality, Asha. What are your views there? Isn't that one of the barriers, the quality and the quality assurances or control? Do you think that's a gap in India? Because I've lived in India, I've lived in Australia for a number of years, in the UK, and there is a difference in the last mile thing. The last detail is missing sometimes. So isn't that a mindset piece as well, Asha? Yeah.
As far as software goes, as far as software and hardware goes, I think quality is not an issue out of India. In fact, if anything, we have better. In fact, if anything, we have better quality. What's missing is design. And so the design of the product, its usability, its user friendliness, that is something that is lacking in India. We have the National Institute of Design, Srishti. We have a bunch of good organizations in India which do fantastic design work, but it hasn't trickled down into sort of the last mile startup design thinking. And design thinking needs to be heavily funded and sponsored by the government to make sure that our working on, let's say, the next solar lamp or the next windmill or the next, electric bicycle, that the design is what is compelling. And at this point, we are one of the things we are doing in the Rajiv Circle Fellowship is so I feel that one sort of a quick, short, and easy way to get this design thinking injected into Indian startup world easily is, instead of forcing people to go through coursework and this, is to plunge them into the design world. So one of the brute force things we do is we get our promising entrepreneurs a passport and a visa to places like Barcelona, Italy, and the Valley. And what I literally do is I schlep them on an airplane, and I ask them I have them show up in Palo Alto, number one. We have a huge residential space connected with a whole bunch of other Airbnbs next door. And for 8 years, I've been literally schlepping 50 people from India, anywhere from 20 to 50 people from India, and some even from Pakistan, actually, promising startups, to come to Palo Alto. And then what I do is I have them stay here for anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months, and we groom them. We plunge them into the world of IoT, into the world of hardware design, and into the world of, for example, Stanford Design School. And just making sure that they are thrown into this in a way they understand design, and that they develop the confidence of taking that next flight back to Palo Alto without my help. And what I love is that after that first visit, they are able to come back and do a whole bunch of things by themselves in the United States, especially in the Silicon Valley, because now they know the ropes. And once they know the ropes in the Valley, they are able to go anywhere. They're able to go to Barcelona, they're able to go to Italy. We are actually partnering with something called the H Farm, which is based in Venice. It's just H-Farm in Venice, and it's basically these are it's an incubator space with 40, 50 startups, Italian startups of their own. And what we are doing is we are partnering with them to say, look, here is excellent tech talent. Yolanda, don't make noise right now. Here is excellent tech talent coming out of India, and we can bring you that engineering talent. You Italians give us the design, give us the design help. And so if we put one or two of the Italians, design-minded Italians, into our Indian startups and then bring them to Silicon Valley, that's a very compelling model compared to simply Indian startups coming straight to the Valley, because they're missing the design element. So these are kind of things that we are working on deep. And, as we go forward, I'm going to ping you guys, and I'll ping Boma in general, to send us great candidates. In fact, this year we were supposed to have our fellowship in May with about 50 people. We had to postpone it. Hopefully we'll have it again in September. But we would like to get recommendations from you guys about sending us some, excellent startups that you think will benefit from that connection in Italy and France, plus, of course, having deep roots in the Valley. as you know, Deep, I don't know if you've had a chance to look into the Rajiv Circle Fellowship, but it's about 250 people by now.
I will be, Asha. That interested me a lot. I read a bit about it, and I will be deep diving a little. Yes, I
Okay.
will. Tell
That's
me.
about 250 people by now. And
Yeah.
they just come as my guests and they stay in, I have an extra guest house here. We are now beginning to call it the India oven because
Okay.
we are cooking these startups here in the Valley.
So
And
is it a happy hour kind of thing?
it's they are here for anywhere from 2 to 3 months sometimes.
Yes.
And it gives them a huge in the Valley. And why Valley? Because Valley is, if the rest of the planet, let's say 100 miles an hour, the Valley is moving and growing at 5,000 miles an hour.
Oh, absolutely. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah, how can we not plug in? We have to plug in. And the lucky thing for Indians is that the Valley is, the DNA of the Valley is largely Indian. Multiple CEO level to the engineering, junior engineering staff.
Yeah.
Indians are the heart and soul of the Valley. And so
I agree.
So people must plug in from India into the Valley. This is the engine of the planet, and India is doing it wonderfully. So, and you must enable even more. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are of that mindset, because so now there's always, India has these categories, as you would know, you have spectrums. There is the spectrum, which is very traveled, very well exposed and upbeat. Then there is a spectrum who are very talented, highly kind of a lot of knowledge, yet they're struggling, they're stifled because of mindsets. And then of course, they're also exploited by, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of exploitation where you have some geniuses who are working on very, very rich projects.
Yes.
And it's a fact because Asha, we also work with a lot of MNCs here, their back-end offices, and we work with their leadership, we work with the middle managers, and we know a lot. We are actually in that ecosystem. So we really know what are these barriers. When I say geniuses, I mean geniuses, but do they have the infrastructure? Do they have the encouragement? No. So there is a whole lot there. Then there, of course, I think by nature, there's a culture piece as well. So Asha, I believe this will be a bit of a holistic approach. It cannot be some sort of quick fix here. There is a foundational piece, which is what I believe. I don't know if you would agree with that. There's some foundational issues as well. I think that needs to be strengthened. What is that foundation that will then help them globalize, meet global standards, for example, an Indian product competing in its own category with the best in the world. So will India ever have an iPhone or what have you? Will India ever have a Microsoft? Those are the questions we not ask. And I'm sure other parts of the world ask the same questions. You have Ukraine, you have Poland, you have many countries which are kind of emerging there. Israel, of course, is one big startup nation, if you like. Yes. So with all of this, Asha, what do you believe is then missing? Now, what is the 2 or 3 things you believe that should be the focus for us to get anywhere close to the vision that you have and probably many others, we all probably share such visions?
You just brought up something extremely important, Deep, which is Israel. If we want to accelerate Indian development to be such, and I'm talking only tech, right? Okay, because that's a growth, and it's a growth industry. It's a growth sector. Yes, things like agriculture and trade and all of that, but there's nothing like tech. It is always an engine because it extends the human brain. Anyway, so
it drives every industry, Asha. It drives every industry. It is technology. You may not be a technology company, but technology drives you.
Right. So as you mentioned just now, the huge piece there, if we want to really accelerate Indian growth, it's Israel. We have to absolutely be keeping that on our radar as a partner country. And in fact, if you guys are interested, if Boma India is interested, we are launching a massive India-Israel initiative at Stanford. And the reason for doing that is because, second only to the Valley is Israel in its growth of the tech sector. And India could, given its proximity, India could benefit hugely from having very close, I would say, contacts. That it's a must that Indian startups start exploring some of the, so for example, the Prime Minister in Israel has, has a scheme where they kicked off a scheme about, I would say 4, 5, 6 years ago, where they wanted to develop a northern part of Tel Aviv for startup growth. So about 45-minute drive from Tel Aviv, there is a, there's a center that the Prime Minister wanted to develop. And what they started offering was, let's say if I invested $100,000 as an angel for a startup, the Israeli government would give me $400,000, 4x the amount for that same startup. And what I started negotiating with them is that, with actually IIT Gandhinagar. So I spoke to Sudhir Jain, who runs IIT Gandhinagar. And I mentioned to him that what I really wanted him to do was give me a few startups from IIT Gandhinagar that can partner, that can actually be set up in Israel, where I put in X amount and Israel puts in 4X. And to his credit, Sudhir Jain has kicked off this enormously important corridor between Gandhinagar and Tel Aviv. This is something which you guys and all of us must help beef up in multiple ways. This has to be scaled up thousands of times so that Israel gets access to the people, the sheer engineering talent that we have, and we get access to Israel's critical velocity. Israel right now has an velocity in the tech sector. And we need to plug into that escape velocity. And there is no other way to do it than to hop on a flight and start establishing those relationships. And I'm actually a big believer, Deep, I'm a big believer in the fact that face-to-face interactions and those visits by people, having Israelis visit us and we visiting Israel. This is an extremely important step. I think the minute we have a little bit better handle on COVID, we should be restarting that conversation with Israel. And I would love it if Boma India really takes an active look at that. That is perhaps the biggest, shortcuts to putting India on a global map and getting our own entrepreneurs to get globalized fast without having to go all the way to the valley. So just these visits to Italy, a couple of things in France and Israel should be enough to get us going into the design mode. And the more we have our people going out into these spaces that have a higher velocity, the faster we will be in terms of integrating globally. One more thing, Deep, that I would recommend that you bring to the radar of your own startups that you're advising is visiting the Shenzhen area in China. So one of the shortcuts, brute force shortcuts that I deploy is again getting promising entrepreneurs to get on a flight, show up in Hong Kong. Okay, from there they take a 2-hour train, and I've had several of my kids do that over the last few years. Show up in Shenzhen. From they take a 2-hour train in Shenzhen. Once they are there, they understand the massive global manufacturing hub that Shenzhen is. And I think those few visits sponsored by us, plus by the Indian, initiatives themselves, has created a massive manufacturing hub in Chennai. Not IIT Chennai, sorry, I think in Chennai. Near IIT Madras, there's a massive hardware manufacturing hub that has come up recently. And it is it's a blessing for us because we, in the Indian tech world, we don't have the kind of hardware manufacturing that we ought to have as a massive nation. We need to have that hardware manufacturing hub. And I think Chennai is becoming that. Again, that is something that needs to be replicated in Delhi, Calcutta, various other places. And the distribution of fab labs there is something that I'm happy to even partner with, by the way, on getting people trained on Fab Labs. So Fab Labs, just quickly give you a 2-second Fab Lab pitch. It is something that was started by the Center for Bits and Atoms at MIT, by Neil, God, I'm forgetting the name. But the professor who started that had set up the first few fab labs in IIT Kanpur and one in IIM Ahmedabad. This must have been 20 years ago. For some reason, they ended up, being put in under lock and key, and kids really didn't have access to that. We bypassed that altogether and established one fab lab at the Center for Environmental Planning and Technology. And after that, the Kerala government replicated our effort and established about 12 fab labs in Kerala. What these things do, fab labs are basically a series, a set of software and hardware infrastructure that allows you to create a product, anything that you can imagine, from a spaceship, a space shuttle, to an earring, a bracelet. You want a prosthetic shoe, a prosthetic limb. Anything that you can imagine, you can create using a fab lab. It's an extremely powerful tool. Yeah. And these are the kind of things that we need to channelize government money towards. Yeah. And the maker movement was something that, again, I started in 2013. And it was literally something that I had first stumbled upon in Cairo. We had, my late husband and I, we had invested in a maker fair that an entrepreneur was starting in Cairo. It was replicated based on a model of the maker fair that happens in California every year. It's been happening for 20, 30 years now. And the maker fair that he started in Cairo then expanded to Ghana. And then it expanded into a whole bunch of other countries. And it's now all over Africa. It's a social movement. And that was what triggered my own interest in kicking it off in India. We started it in Ahmedabad in 2013 with the help of National Institute of Design. It's growing fast. It's in India. It's all over India now. And there are some in Kochi. There's one in Baroda. There are some in villages. Yeah. Again, just like Africa, the maker movement is becoming a social movement. Yeah. And so connection of the maker festivals in India with Fab Labs is an explosive mix that can really rocket ship us into hardware manufacturing.
Brilliant. Asha, that has been, what can I say? That has been very insightful. And yes, Asha, I hear you. I think we should be in touch. We also are on some sort of a mission, resonate with many things you're saying. We're speaking with Lara. I think we will do that. We will remain in touch, and we will see how do we kind of progress, and how do we sort of garner the ownership piece here, because I do know working closely there, it's also a mindset piece here, huge mindset piece as well, which probably needs to be addressed. So Asha, that's been very insightful for the audience as well. You had some amazing stories, and which are real stories. The huge experience that you're bringing onto the table, and been very informative, and I'm sure there should be some action through this. And I also know people would get in touch with us, probably want to hear more, and probably all of that. So we will kind of collaborate and see where this goes. But then again, thank you for making time, coming on board and speaking with us. And I'll look forward to many more. Asha.
Thank you for having me on the platform, and wish you all the best as this platform itself takes off.
Oh yeah, well, let's see where this goes. Our intention is very clear. So are our actions. Very passionate, and I guess when all of the three meet up, we always create something breakthrough. And we'll talk more about the product that we are creating as well to you at the right time. Yeah. So I think, I'm not sure if we have the other panel, the speakers. I'm not sure if Michael and Arnab are still around. We could probably, if they're around, we could, probably have them come on. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Mostly apologies. We had a technical glitch while starting with Arnab. So we kind of got kicked off 10 minutes late, yet I think it was, from my perspective, very engaging, very informative. I want to, kind of have you all say a few things you'd like to say, something that surfaced if you were tuned in to what Asha said, or tuned into what Arnab was saying, or Michael, and you want to kind of just get into a bit of a huddle and talk random for about 5 minutes, and then we can kind of wrap it up.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Arnab. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet all of you too. Thanks. It was very inspiring. I mean, I think the ability to get people and technology and next generation way of thinking to apply to this world we find ourselves in, which is impacted dramatically by COVID-19. I am very, very thankful that we're thinking about all of these problems. And I came through a Scripps board meeting just 2 weeks ago where we were talking about how to redesign our workspaces for new buildings we're planning on building on our campus to be more compliant with the world where pandemics are more the norm than the 100-year exception. So I think it's a very thoughtful way to bringing the right people and building the right environments and spaces, both ecologically but also scientifically.
And where are
So
you
very
based,
excited by
Arnab?
that.
Whereabouts are you based?
I'm in San Diego.
Oh, okay, California. Good, good.
Yes.
We are neighbors.
Talking of buildings, you have Michael sitting right next to you, Arnab. I hope you
Exactly.
know.
No.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I think
Smart
Michael, similar to
campuses.
what you had mentioned, that's something that's very, very, very real and present, not just from two things to think about is how we, hopefully COVID-19 helps us address many larger, many ways problems that we face. So
You know,
I'm excited by that.
Michael, anything you want to say as before you hit the scene in the morning? I know it's morning there. You guys are getting ready for your day. We guys are ending our day. So, Michael, what surfaced for you today? What kind of
I mean,
what are
I
you going back?
learned a lot. Arnav and Asha much that it was really an earful. It's great to see um, smart investors like yourself, Asha, getting involved in supporting companies doing the right things. I've been an entrepreneur my whole career. I think successful companies need investors that understand the goals and stick by them to achieve those goals, and that's terrific. So listening to your stories was really, as Arnab said, it was inspiring for me too, being an entrepreneur that built something from a desk and a phone twice. And I know what that journey's like. And we need people out there, taking that journey. Um, and I look at people like yourself, Arnab, the same way as entrepreneurs, innovators doing this on the same journey. Your medium is medicine, but that is also the same creative, inspiring journey that any entrepreneur takes. So for me, it was really valuable to listen and informative, insightful. Arnab, you're sharing like where you think things are at right now, and again, you made a similar comment about the unprecedented collaboration. It's going to require unprecedented collaboration to solve climate change. So, I think I see a lot of common threads here, and it was really a pleasure to.
The message I have really is for the audience. When they heard each one of you and go through your presentations, I think the one message is nothing comes easy. There is a lot of hard work, eye for detail. And that is something that professionals out there who are watching, one thing I definitely encourage them to take away from all of what you all have talked about. There is a lot of detail. It takes time. It's perseverance, resilience. Nothing comes easy. The kind of work Arnab is doing, Michael, Asha, to build things is a step-by-step piece. And at every point, there's a lot of discipline, focus. I think sometimes that's missing in many entrepreneurs out there or founders. It's that not sometimes driven by passion, because passion, I think, makes you do what you guys are doing. Like I said, it's not an easy road. And then on top of that, the icing on the cake, if you like, is the pandemic that comes in, right? So to deal with all of this and continue to progress, that's the mindset. And really enjoyed your company, and look forward, like I said, to stay connected. I hope all three of you do connect at some point in time. It'll be great. A collaboration of brains, knowledge, information, experience is always good. So with that, I'd like to bid adieu and wish you all a fantastic day. And again, thank you very much for coming on. And we have the whole week going on. There's stuff happening in Poland and France. Tomorrow, I think there is a similar, collaboration or of speakers and experts in Poland and then China. And Brazil, of course, is also one of the Boma partners. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So nice to meet everyone. Yes.
Thank you. It was very nice meeting
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Have a nice evening. Have a nice day.
Thank you very
All of you
much,
too.
Deep.